Hey, everybody. Welcome again to another episode of the Adult Autism, a Spectrum of Uniqueness podcast. Let me start off by saying something before I get into all of the content of this podcast episode today. Not everything I touch on in terms of romantic and sexual relationships among autistic folks will apply to you. And I'm betting you'll listen to something I'm saying and think to yourself, well, that's not true of me. And there's a good reason to think that because there's plenty of variation in how things work for people in relationships, especially this facet of relationships. My aim is just to point out some things that are that generally apply to autistic folks and what you can do to help yourself if and when you develop an intimate relationship with someone. Okay, so with that in mind, let's consider when romantic and sexual relationships start to become a thing for people, not just autistic people, but people in general. And it's usually during adolescence. Most autistic folks don't come into this world uninterested in connecting with other people, even though the media might portray you that way. In fact, research shows that autistic adolescents and adults express a similar interest in romantic and sexual relationships as neurotypical people. But let's face it, adolescence can be pretty confusing and awkward, especially when it comes to romantic and sexual relationships. And why is that? Well, any autistic teen won't consistently get decent sexual and relationship education, especially in a way that matches their learning style. Some report feeling unprepared for things like flirting, dating norms, and the unspoken social scripts that neurotypical peers seem to somehow absorb by osmosis. And for many autistic teens, early experiences come from trial and error, maybe from the internet, what they learn on the internet, or watching how their peers interact with one another, or even more, maybe watching characters on TV instead of having adults actually teach them and guide them about relationships. These early learning moments, feeling confused about cues, misunderstanding intentions, or internalizing mixed feedback can leave lasting imprints, many of which are negative. They don't teach how to love, they teach how others expect you to love. And that can leave autistic people feeling out of sync in relationships. Now, as autistic people move into early and middle adulthood, many, but certainly not all, experience a pattern. I'll call it continued desire in varied experiences. Big term. So, what does that mean anyway? Well, research consistently finds most autistic adults want romantic relationships. Some are partnered, many have had partners in the past. Even when they're not in relationships, many autistic folks describe the difference between choosing to be single and feeling single because dating has felt inaccessible, um, maybe confusing or discouraging. If you think back to any dating or intimate relationships you may have had with people in the past, there are plenty of obstacles that can pose problems. So, like, for example, communication differences and having to constantly figure out unspoken social signals can make the early stages of dating feel unpredictable or exhausting. Um, Sensory preferences play a role too, from touch sensitivities to differences in responses to physical closeness. This kind of stuff influences how intimacy feels and what feels safe or pleasurable. And this isn't about being picky. It's not about being distant or difficult. It's about how different nervous systems experience closeness and safety. For example, Someone might deeply care about their partner, but feel tense or fluttered um, if touch happens too quickly or without warning. What looks like pulling away on the outside might actually be the nervous system saying, "This is too much right now," or "This feels threatening." Some autistic adults, by the way, identify as asexual or demisexual, meaning they may experience little or no sexual attraction or only feel it after a strong emotional bond has formed with a person. So for them, affection and connection might center more on things like emotional safety, shared interest, routine, or a deeply connected relationship, more so than on physical or sexual expression, which can look very different from the dominant culture's romantic scripts, things that we see in movies, that how things should be in relationships. Here's the thing. These experiences teach lessons about things like pacing, consent, communication, and what kind of relationship feels right. And you know what? In most cases, that kind of learning only comes through lived experience. Now, this is probably a good time to bring in some actual voices from research studies. In 2020, some researchers looked at intimacy among autistic adults. One of the research participants explained the meaning of touch. They said, "Skin to skin contact helps me build trust and emotionally bond with another person." So, for some autistic people, physical closeness is about safety and attachment more than it is romance. Now, in the same study, another participant talked about balance and self soothing. "When I'm needing comfort, I ask my partner. If he's in a place to give it, that feels really good. And if he's not, I don't try to take it personally. I find another way to comfort myself, like cuddling with my kitty." That's a great example of emotional maturity, by the way. Asking for what you need, respecting your partner's boundaries, and still knowing how to take care of yourself. Now, in a different study that came out in 2024, the researchers looked at how um, autistic adults experience sexuality and intimacy, not as something that's missing, but as something that's shaped by how their brains and nervous systems work. One of the research participants described it this way: "For me, being with someone I trust changes everything about sex and closeness. When I feel safe, I can express desire. But when I'm anxious or rushed, touch just feels overwhelming." What that captures so well is that for many autistic adults, intimacy isn't just about attraction, it's about emotional safety, sensory comfort, and feeling understood. And when those pieces are in place, closeness can feel meaningful and enjoyable. And when they're not, even um, well-intended affection can feel stressful or confusing. Now, a person put it this way: "It wasn't until I felt truly understood that physical intimacy stopped feeling scary and started feeling real and started feeling good." Many participants emphasized that satisfying relationships didn't come from trying to copy what they saw in movies or on social media. They they came from learning how to communicate clearly, how to set boundaries, to talk openly about comfort levels, and build trust at their own pace. In other words, this research reinforces something many autistic adults already know from experience. Sexuality and intimacy aren't one size fits all. They work best when partners are willing to listen, to adapt, and co-create a relationship that fits the nervous systems and needs of the people in it. So When you step back and look at all of this, the research, the lived experiences, the voices of autistic adults themselves, a clear theme starts to emerge. Healthy, satisfying relationships don't come from trying to act more normal or forcing yourself into someone else's version of romance. They come from understanding how you experience connection, learning how to communicate that honestly, and finding ways to work with your partner rather than against your own nervous system. And the good news, these are skills. These are learnable. These are adaptable, and they're things you can work on at any stage of life. Hey everyone, just wanted to give you an update on my course, Unmasked: Living Authentically as an Autistic Adult. You may have heard me talk about this before. It's an online course that lasts 6 weeks. It's for autistic folks who have recently been diagnosed, recently meaning within the last few years, and want to learn more about themselves, how to navigate relationships, how to do self-care. Lots of good stuff in this course. It's online, meaning that a lot of the stuff that you do is to read and to listen and to watch and to learn all about yourselves. But also, we do some Zoom calls too, so we can have that really nice interaction with one another to continue the learning experience. Right now, I'm in about the halfway point with my beta group. This is the first time I've done this class with a group of autistic adults, and it's really cool. I'm really enjoying it, and I think they are too. But anyway, I just wanted to give you an update on that. And if you want to be placed on a waiting list to participate in an upcoming class, check out my website, chrisquarto.com/online-courses. That's chrisquarto.com/online-courses. And you can send me an email if you would like as well to be placed on that wait list. Chris@chrisquarto.com. And now back to the episode. So now I want to share 3 practical ideas that many autistic adults have found helpful for building relationships that feel more satisfying and authentic. So let's talk about these. First thing, practice saying what you need simply and early. A lot of relationship stress comes from people trying to guess what the other person wants. And for autistic adults, that guessing game can be especially exhausting. Instead of waiting until something feels uncomfortable or overwhelming, it can really help to share small preferences early on, especially about communication, about boundaries and how fast or slow things move. And you know what? This doesn't have to be a big, serious relationship talk. It can sound simple and natural, like, something like, I do better with direct communication, or I like to take things slowly and get comfortable before things get serious, or it helps me when plans are clear. I'm not great at reading hints, so I appreciate honesty. So you're not being demanding, by the way, when you say these things. You're giving the other person a roadmap to understand you better. And people who are a good fit for you, they'll usually feel relieved by that kind of clarity. They're not going to be put off by it. So that's what you really want to look for in a relationship. Here's the second thing. Pay attention to your comfort, not just the other person's expectations. Many autistic adults are incredibly good at adjusting to other people. And sometimes that means pushing through discomfort just to keep a relationship going. Well, a helpful shift is to start checking in with yourself more often, especially in the early stages of a relationship. You might ask yourself things like, do I feel calm or tense around this person? Do I feel safe being myself, or am I constantly monitoring what I say or do? And after spending time together, do I feel okay or completely wiped out? these things matter. Feeling uneasy doesn't mean you're doing relationships wrong. It often means something needs adjusting. Like I was talking about before, the pace, the environment, how often you're together, or how communication is happening. And by the way, listening to your comfort level, it's not selfish. It's how you protect your energy and your sense of safety. It's all about self care. Here's the third thing: look for mutual effort, not just chemistry. We hear a lot about chemistry in relationships, that instant spark, that feeling that things should just click. But for many autistic adults, satisfying relationships are built less on spark and more on mutual effort. So pay attention to whether the other person tries to understand you instead of changing you, whether they're open to talking things through when something feels off, if they respect your boundaries without guilting you or pressuring you. Are they willing to adjust when something isn't working? A partner, they don't have to be perfect. You're never going to find a perfect partner anyway. And they don't have to be autistic to be a good fit. What matters is whether both people are willing to learn and adapt to one another. A relationship that feels steady, I guess I'll say, respectful, and emotionally safe, that often matters more than one that looks exciting from the outside. And that brings me to a final thought I'd like to leave with you. If there's one thing I hope you take away from today's episode, it's this: there is nothing wrong with how you experience connection, attraction, or intimacy in your relationships. You're not behind. You're not too much. Or you're not doing relationships wrong just because your relationship looks different than other people's relationships. Healthy, meaningful relationships, they're built over time. And you know what they're built on? They're built on things through like honesty, patience, learning, self-respect. And you're allowed to move at the pace that works for you and honors who you really are. Thanks again for listening. I don't take any of you for granted. And remember that your uniqueness is awesome.